I am Ben Doc Askins, the psychedelic science war storyteller, and this is the Anti-Hero's Journey podcast. What's up, Anti-Hero's Journey podcast audience? This is Doc Askins coming at you with another one of these Q5 podcasts that I like to do, where I trick really cool people into spending some time with me, telling their stories. I use these 5 questions in my own psychedelic assisted therapy practice here in Louisville, Kentucky. If you like to work with me, you can go to advancedpracticeproviders.com, and I've still got some time available to help some people out. And if you want to know a bit more about who I am and what the heck I'm doing running a podcast, you can just go check out my book at antiheroesjourney.com. The audiobook's available there too. You don't necessarily have to learn to read in order to get engaged there. I'll read the book to you if you'd like that even better. The podcast here is just a free opportunity for people to kind of get a peek behind the curtain of some of the questions that I like to ask doing psychedelic assisted therapy. And the cool person that I've hoodwinked into letting me interview her today is Rais, who is the CEO and co-founder of Enthea. She has helped dozens of startups, nonprofit organizations, academic research institutions, and small businesses raise funds, operate according to their mission and values, and implement processes that enhance their overall efficiency. Sherry believes in living and working in alignment with purpose and is currently focused on expanding access to psychedelic-assisted therapy to alleviate human suffering. Enthea is a licensed third-party administrator of health plan benefits with a mission to provide as many people as possible safe and affordable access to psychedelic therapy. Before this, Sherry consulted for over 10 years with the United Nations and World Bank, implementing poverty reduction programs at the national level in over 35 countries. Sherry holds a master's degree in public policy and administration from the London School of Economics and a bachelor's degree in psychology and international development from McGill University. She also completed the certificate in psychedelic therapies and research from CIIS in 2021. In addition to being Enthea's CEO, she is the executive director of the Boston Psychedelic Research Group and a strategic advisor for CIIS, the California Institute of Integral Studies. Sherry, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today, my friend. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I think you just answered my whole story, so we're done.
Well, we talked prior to this, and you've got some crazy chapters in your story there from working with the UN and the World Bank and some of that stuff. So maybe we can double click on a few of the things in that like Google Earth flyover that I just did, if that's okay with you.
That sounds good. Since you tricked me into being here, that sounds good.
Yeah, let the trickery continue with question number 1. What's your story, Sherry?
Well, I think the story is still being written and still unraveling. But as it stands now, I am originally from Toronto, Canada. I am the daughter of immigrants. My mother is from East Africa, Tanzania. My father is from Pakistan. And I, due to the way they raised me, grew up very aware of just how lucky I was to be growing up in Toronto in a middle-class family, actually in the suburbs outside of Toronto. I was really aware as a child that life could have been different had my parents not emigrated to Canada. I also had a deep sense of service. Both of my parents emphasized the importance of volunteering from a very young age. So that's part of my story. And both of my parents worked in the travel industry. So that's part of my story as well, probably what led me to become nomadic. But we traveled a lot throughout my childhood because, we got to go on free or low-cost trips due to my parents' work. And that allowed me to see the world and open my eyes a lot. So getting back to my story. Growing up in Toronto, daughter of immigrants, I think I was aware at an early age how lucky I was and wanted to spend my life serving others. And I decided that pretty young. So I started to look for ways, even in elementary school and then on in high school, to volunteer and give back. And I took that to my professional life and studied, like you said, international development and psychology in college, and then went on to consult to the UN and the World Bank. And in that work, I decided that I wanted to be in my consulting work fully in the field. So rather than just going out for, a few weeks a year, I spent all of my time abroad. I might have come home for just the holidays, maybe 10 days a year, and spent a decade, as you mentioned, doing work with the goal of reducing poverty. So that's a huge part of, again, my story. And in that work, I got to see firsthand what the global mental health crisis meant. We read all these statistics, we see all these numbers, but I really witnessed firsthand how much people were suffering, especially after, years of conflict, war, intergenerational poverty, and the like. So that experience provided me with deep insights into the complex relationship between economic stability and mental health. And I think that spurred my transition into the field of psychedelic therapy, where I recognized the untapped potential of these treatments. And as one of the co-founders of Enthea, I am here to broaden access, safe and affordable access to psychedelic therapies, because I believe strongly in their ability to heal and transform lives.
Unaelewa Kiswahili?
It was my first language. And here's an interesting turn in this, story that I don't think I've ever shared publicly, but my grandma, was home with us, taking care of my brother and I while my parents were working. And I can't remember what grade I was in, probably like grade 2 or grade 3, where my parents had parent teacher interviews or whatever that's called. And the teacher kept referring to my parents like, oh, Sherry has such good English, like kept saying that. And, my parents speak only English with us. And at some point, my mom was like, why do you keep saying she has such good English? And it was only then that my parents discovered that my teacher had put me into English as a second language immersion. And so I was not with the rest of my class all day. And which can, probably like hinder your academic growth if English is indeed your first language, or if you are good at English. And so my mom was very upset that this had happened. And I think she made my grandma move out for a little bit and banned the speaking of Swahili or any languages, because she did not want that to happen again. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
English was my native language, and I'm almost as good at it as second language speakers, I think, at this point. But, well, that's crazy. So Tanzania is a special place in my heart. I visited there, 2 or 3 lifetimes ago or whatever. I'm curious a bit more about maybe how did your parents wind up in Toronto? A Pakistani Tanzanian combination is a pretty rare but exciting and beautiful thing to have in the world at this point.
Yeah. So there were a lot of Indian migrants that went to East Africa many generations ago. And my mom was part of that community. And then, unfortunately, there was a period when my mom was around, 10, 12 years old, where there was a lot of xenophobia and sort of the pushing out of these migrants that had been in East Africa for so many generations. So my mother and her family had to leave Africa in order to seek a more, I guess, life that was worth living, where they could have a chance at freedom and economic growth. And they were essentially refugees, and Pakistan was taking people from Africa in this situation. So so my mom then went to Pakistan with her mother, my grandmother, and met my dad and fell in love.
That's beautiful. That's an amazing story. Yeah. You had mentioned to me, I think, when we'd spoken previously, something about being kidnapped at some point. Is that accurate?
That is accurate and not a story I often share so publicly, but
We can certainly
um,
cut that out if you don't want to talk about that. That's totally
no,
okay.
it's fine. I just won't go over, too many details. Um, yes, I have been kidnapped and robbed at gunpoint and knife point. My house has been in also robbed, like completely robbed. I think I've been held at gunpoint multiple times. I did work again, like all over Africa, Asia, South America, and some of like the poorest neighborhoods and communities. And then also a colleague of mine was kidnapped for a longer period of time, for several months. And so that had a significant impact on me as well. It's not my story to share, but it definitely did play an impact in uh, looking for effective ways to deal with PTSD.
Well, you've endured quite a bit and you've got a big smile on your face still today. What's behind your capacity for enduring all of those sorts of things, you think?
Um, so many things I think that I'm grateful for allow me to be resilient. I'm really grateful. I mean, I could go on all day about the things I'm grateful for that allow me to be smiling, but I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had. Like I'm just feel so lucky. I keep having a chance to make a difference in the lives of others in my past work and my work now. The unwavering support of my family. So I speak daily with my dad and my brother, and that provides me with a lot of strength. I had, we all have tough childhoods and great childhoods and everything in between, but I'm really lucky that despite some difficulties, I grew up with a lot of love. So my foundation has been deeply rooted in love. I think not a day goes by without telling my family I love them multiple times a day. And so, yeah, there's just so much to be grateful for. You can focus, at least my ethos is like I can focus on all of the negative things that have happened, or I can focus on all of the great things that are happening. And I choose to do the latter.
Yeah, well, that's a beautiful thing. Um, we talked a little bit about some, low points along the way. Do you have any stories from your time and your travels abroad that you would consider like the peak moments of being in 35 different countries, helping to try to address some pretty significant national level problems like poverty and mental health?
I do have a few moments. I think one would be I was in Niger, which is a beautiful and also difficult country to work in, especially as a woman. And this is not to say anything. I don't mean to speak negatively about, uh, it's not a generalization of the whole country, but in the work I was doing, this was for me like a career moment that I had to like take a step back and realize, reflect on, reflect on maybe some learning lessons. I had advocated for empowering women in Niger, and how I had advocated for that was I was implementing a program called a cash transfer, where you give money every month to the head of the household and you don't ask for it back. So it's not a loan. It's kind of like welfare or universal basic income. But if you can't give it to everyone, you give it to a small part of the population to help them get out of poverty. And I was advocating doing this for the female head of household instead of the male head of household. And it was a pretty big deal because that was not traditional and that's not how cash transfers are done, especially in Africa. You're usually giving it to the male head of household. And I put up a big fight and won this fight. So we did end up giving the money to the female head of household. And then I realized that the women in the families had not ever been in charge of managing the money. So they did not know what to do with it. And so rather than spending it on household expenses, they spent it often on themselves, like on buying themselves new fabric to make clothes, and not spending it on like the basic necessities of the family. And so to me, that was just, yeah, a lesson learned of how blind I was to the situation. And I felt like here I was with my Western mentality of like, let's empower women and this is how you do it. And I realized that that's not the, we ended up then doing programs to educate women on how to spend money. So it did work out, but it took a few extra steps. And, you know, it was a good point for me to just reflect on that.
Yeah. How would you do it differently at this point? Lessons learned, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk more to the community. Maybe not call it focus groups, but hold focus groups, so to say, and not just impose what I think is best, but actually talk to the community about what is needed and what would work.
Yeah. I remember a similar program in Tanzania that I interacted with, and they're like, the criteria they landed on for trying to select people for a similar sort of situation was whether or not somebody already had a garden. They were looking into those sorts of things as like, yeah, if you can manage a garden, maybe you can figure out how to expand that or whatever. Yeah.
I actually worked on a lot of, even we did have a program in Tanzania for a cash transfer. And yes, you have to kind of, it's a little bit weird. You have to work with the census data to sort of determine like what's the threshold of poverty. You can't just look at income. So you would have to look at things like how big is your garden? How many cows do you have? Or how many chicken do you have? Or, you know, things like this to sort of determine it's an interesting mechanism.
Yeah. It's certainly a lot more complicated than we'd like to think. We could just kind of drop in and pour some money into an economy and it would just flourish or something. But it's always way more complicated when you scratch below the surface when you're dealing with human beings, isn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, you got any other stories you'd like to share before we talk a little bit about some of the other questions on the list?
Other stories. I guess this is an older story, but one that defined, you know, one that defined my life and the work I do was when I was in high school. I decided to lie to my parents and tell them I was sleeping at a friend's house. And instead, I slept on the streets to understand what it meant to be homeless. Um, and I did that for 2 nights. And of course, I'm super privileged in the fact that I could do that knowing I still had a home to go to if I needed. But I really did go with barely any money. I think I kept some money just in case of an emergency. Maybe I kept like $20 on me just in case, but didn't use it, you know, begged for money in order to eat, slept on the streets, and talked to as many homeless people as I could. And that for me just reshaped how I looked at mental health. I was like 16 years old, maybe 15, actually, grade 10, 15 years old. And every single person I talked to seemed to be struggling in some way with their mental health. And I just realized like, oh, it's not really their fault that they're in this situation. Like, we have a broken system if we're not taking care of these people's health. And one story, this is like going way back, but one story from that experience that was really beautiful for me was when I was sitting there like begging for money, a homeless man gave me all of his money. And he dumped his hat in my hat and he walked away, and I went after him and I said to him, hey, like, sir, you know, you don't have to give me your money, take it back. Like, I'm not actually homeless. And then I think whatever money I did have on me, the $10 or $20, I also gave it to him. And he said to me that he knows I'm not homeless, that I'm like this girl that's asking homeless people what it's like to be homeless. And I was very confused. And I said, if you know I'm not homeless, why did you give me all of your money? And he said to me, well, you were sitting there and I saw you were sitting there for a few hours, and you probably now know what it feels like for people to walk by you and ignore you. I was like, yeah. And he asked me a little bit about how it felt. And he was like, I want you to also know what it feels like when someone does see you. And so that was, that was a really important for me. And since then, I have tried almost every weekend, no matter where I am, to give back whatever city I'm in to homeless people, whether it's buying a sandwich or giving, some money. But that was just so important. Like, that somebody could think about helping another human. Like, this is the beauty in human connection. Like, we want others to feel these experiences, even while you're asking my story, right? Like, this kind of sharing. Am I allowed to give you one more?
That's an incredible contrast. I wanted to ask you, was that in Toronto?
That was in Toronto.
I spent a spring break sleeping on the street up in Toronto for similar sorts of reasons when I was in college, and I'm a large man, so it seemed a little bit less scary to me. But you got a lot of backbone. You got a lot of guts doing something like that. I remember a few friends of mine and we all decided to sleep on the street for a week together just to see what it was like. And we limited it to a toonie. We each had a toonie was all we were allowed to take out there. And
back then you could have gotten to...
We slept on Church Street mostly. I don't know if you know where.
Yeah, I know Church Street.
Yeah. People there are pretty friendly at one end of the street anyway. But we broke up a few fights. It was a bunch of crazy stories from that week. I had one buddy who's like an entrepreneur. He went in with a toonie and came back out with like $200 or whatever. And I ate a hot dog the first day and wasted my toonie and was hungry the rest of the week or whatever. There's a big difference. But yeah, you were. I hadn't shared that story in decades. Totally forgot I'd done it until you were telling a similar one. But you had another story that you'd wanted to share, so go for it.
That's really cool that you did the same thing also in Toronto. Another quick story is when I was in Ecuador, I befriended a kid who I'm still friends with today, even though it's been 20 years, and he's no longer a kid. And he was a street kid, and I was volunteering at a center for street children. And we just became very close. And so we started doing everything together. And I don't think I've told this story publicly, and I don't know how to condense it, but I'll try. We started doing everything together and became very close. And all of a sudden, and I mean, like, we would see each other every day for months because I was volunteering at the center for several months. And all of a sudden I stopped seeing him. I asked around. No one knew where he was. I went to his school. He hadn't been to school. It was like weeks gone by that I hadn't seen this kid. And it's not like he had a cell phone at the time. So there was no way of, no other way of contacting him. He ended up on my porch on Mother's Day, on my doorstep, sorry. And I didn't even pin that it was Mother's Day. I was 17. I asked him where he had been and why he hadn't been at the center, why I haven't seen him, why he hadn't been to school. And he had explained that he had been working for like 3 weeks. He works doing juggling on the street, at the traffic lights, and been working nonstop for 3 weeks in order to buy all these like presents for Mother's Day, and gave them to me. All these like very thoughtful presents and my roommates at the time, which is very sweet. The story gets better. I'll try to make it quicker. So he gives me all these presents. We spend the day together, and towards the end of the day, he's getting emotional and kind of crying. And I had never seen him cry before, which is totally fine. Kids and boys can cry, but I asked him why he was crying, and he said he actually wanted to spend the day with his biological mom. And he had actually worked hard to buy her presents, but she lives several hours away and he can't go on his own. And his older brothers were supposed to take him. And they didn't end up taking him. Okay, I'll try to shorten the story.
You're
I'm
doing
not doing a
great.
good job. Not doing a good
Nah,
job.
you're doing great. Who cares?
And I don't even know what the point of the story is, but you asked for stories. It went from what's my story to like sharing stories, and this is like this
that's
is
the way it's supposed to go. Yeah, yeah.
This is a story that for me changed my life. So, I ended up saying, okay, I'll take you. We'll go see your mom, and we'll go see her, and however far it is. And he says, okay, but he needs to take a few weeks to work by her presence. And I was like, okay, but don't skip school. So we like wait a month. He goes to school and then he works and he saves up all this money to buy presents for his mom. And by the way, I had offered to pay for the presents, but he insisted that they need to come from him. And he's basically like, killing himself, not literally, but like going to school every day and then working like 10-hour days on the street just for a month to buy all these presents. The day comes, we take the train and the bus or whatever we need to do. Actually, it was a few buses, no train, and go to the rural area where his mom is. She doesn't know we're going. It's pouring rain. We're waiting outside in the rain. She finally comes, lets us in, and she sees all of this stuff that he had bought, which, by the way, are not the things you would think you buy for a mom for Mother's Day. I think like perfumes and scarves and chocolates. No, it was like basic necessities like rice and sugar and milk and flour and toothpaste. And I think like the bonus was cereal, like really like eggs, oil, really basic necessities. And he had worked so hard and she didn't even say thank you. And I was so angry. Like we sat in the rain, he worked his butt off. She didn't even like show any ounce of gratitude. And hours later, when we're leaving, she says to me, like, by the way, thanks for all the stuff. And
she thought you did it.
Of course, she thought like the older Canadian, like richer person is buying all this stuff as charity. And I was so upset, but my Spanish wasn't good enough. Now it is, but back then it wasn't good enough to like correct her and communicate my frustration. And so, but this kid and I had a bond where he would understand my really bad Spanish. And so I go to him and I'm like, oh man, we have to tell your mom the truth. Like she can't think that I bought all this stuff. And this 11-year-old kid looked me in the eyes and said, God answered my prayers. I was like, what? And he said, how bad would my mom have felt knowing that her 11-year-old son had to buy her these things? And anyways, you asked for stories. That really changed like my view on humility and like wanting credit for things and ego. Like it shouldn't. We're so programmed to be like, I want credit for this. I want the likes. I want the comments. I want, I want people to see me. I want to put it on my resume. And here was this kid who was just like, nope, I don't want to be even acknowledged by my mom. Like, I'd rather not. So there's a story for you.
Yeah. You highlight a lot of these stories of service. And you mentioned that was kind of a value of yours from a very early age. Do you have any sort of insight into where that came from or why that's been such a central theme of your life?
The only insights I have are sort of what I told you. And maybe it's not the complete story. Maybe I'll gain more insights over time. But yeah, being aware that I was born with privilege and so lucky to have been born in Canada in a middle-class household and been able to access water and food and an education and just having this like thing inside of me that's like, I want to give back. It's not, I want to try to make it more fair.
Okay. Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, I ask people about their stories, mostly to get at the past and at memory and, a bit about who we are as much as we can gain insight into that. But then I also ask about intentions. Like what do you imagine? Where are you headed? What are your intentions going forward to try to engage in the totality of who you are? You're not just memory, you're also imagination. So what are your intentions going forward, Sherry?
So I think right now, in this present moment, my primary intention is to redefine and expand the scope of mental health treatment through the integration of psychedelic therapy into mainstream healthcare. So through employers, and that's what I'm doing with Enthea. So I'm trying to create a model of care that is innovative and inclusive, offering new hope for people who have found traditional treatments to be ineffective. So that's like a main intention, but beyond my, I guess, professional goals, I'm dedicated to, yeah, just being of service, um, filling my life with love and gratitude, knowing God and getting closer to God. Um, yeah. So yes, professional and personal, but they're very closely related.
Yeah. Are you willing to say more about some of your, the outlets for that in your personal life? Like, are there organizations or communities or, of one stripe or another that you pour some of that service into?
Yeah. Uh, my own makeshift organization, which I'm joking, doesn't really have a name. One of the ways that I try to be of service is, I mentioned before, on weekends, I actually go on runs regularly, but every weekend when I run, I try to I intentionally feed as many homeless people as I can. So anywhere between 10 to 30 people.
Wait. So you go on a run and stop and try to feed 10 to 30 people? Like when you say a run, you mean you put on some sneakers, you do a half marathon, and 30 people get fed? Is that what you're
Yeah,
talking about? All right.
on
I'm
the
just
weekend. Yes,
making sure I'm
yes.
tracking here. All
Usually
right.
I like, depending on the city, I'll know where like I can find
Are
10
you like just
people.
running with a camelback and like handing out Cliff Bars, or are you taking people to like McDonald's, or what?
I
Like,
was
explain
gonna
this to me.
say,
This
if
is no,
I'm
I
not
love
being
this and it's
judged,
amazing, but I want to
if
understand.
if I'm not being judged, it's usually McDonald's.
No
Before
judgment here. There's no judgment here.
before COVID, I would make sandwiches and travel
Okay.
with a backpack with
Yeah.
Ziploc bags and sandwiches. And then COVID happened, and people didn't want my homemade like it didn't.
Sure.
It
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
okay to
Did you
do homemade.
sterilize this sandwich first? No.
And so and so then I started buying McDonald's, and now I could probably go back to making the sandwiches. But in all honesty, for the world to hear, if they're listening to this podcast, McDonald's is way easier than making the
Yeah. Right.
sandwiches.
You know.
And so, I mean, and it doesn't have to be McDonald's. I could
Yeah,
maybe
it's
go
way
to,
healthier. McDonald's in Canada is about as healthy as,
there you
McDonald's
go.
gets, I'm sure, right? Yeah. Way healthier than the US or yeah.
Yes, I'm not always in Canada, but we'll pretend. So that's one thing I do of service. Now saying this out loud, I'm like, I really should go back to making the sandwiches, but
No judgment here. I'm not trying to change your mind. I think it's amazing that so like how far do you run? You go on these little service runs. What do you call them? Is there a name for this?
There's no name. Should we come up with a name?
Yes, absolutely. I think this needs to become not just a named thing, but a thing that people do.
I mean, it's a great way to exercise, and I don't just feed. So I also, one of my intentions, so I've been doing this since I was 18. So it's been 20 years of doing these runs.
Seriously?
And yeah, I wonder how many people
this needs to be a thing.
have.
And your last name is Race. This is bullshit. This simulation we live in is so lazy about naming things. All right, so the Sherry Race
Oh my
is
God.
where you pack as much food into a rucksack as you can carry,
Oh my
and you're
God.
not allowed to stop running and go home until your rucksack's empty. Like
There you go.
it's pretty basic. There we go.
You want to do Enthea's marketing?
Yeah. There it is. I can carry a lot of food, let me tell you what. We could pack a ruck for 150 pounds, and I'll do the walking and you pass it out, all right?
Sounds like a great plan. It sounds like a really good plan. So I do that, and I've been doing that for 20 years, but about 4 or 5 years ago, I set an intention of, I used to do it true to my name, like a race, and it would be just racing through neighborhoods and handing out these sandwiches. And a few years ago, I slowed down. I still run, but I said that when I do this, I want to actually stop and have conversations. So it became like, it went from like a 2-hour affair to like a 4 to 5 hour affair, because I'm really like stopping and having conversations. And through that, I see sometimes, are there ways I can be of more service? Like, what are people's story? Since, the theme of today's podcast, I get to know people's story, and like, what are ways maybe I could help them? Maybe they've just, need help refreshing their resume and getting access to a computer and sending it out. Maybe they need help like finding a relative, and they could do that on Facebook or something. So I try to see if there are other things I can do besides the Happy Meal.
Nice. I think, yeah. Did you say the Happy Meal?
Yeah.
Nice. The first like full marathon I ever ran was in Tanzania, and I remember filling my pockets with candy, and I'd throw it to the kids when you'd run through a village or whatever.
With you? Yeah,
Ninataka pipi. Candy
yeah.
is pipi in Swahili there. Yeah, I remember that now. There's all these weird memories coming back that I haven't talked about in decades here. Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah, we should do that in Boston sometime. That's where like you're headquartered, and Enthea is out of Boston. Is that right?
Yeah, we're all remote, but we are registered as our headquarters in Boston. Yes.
Yeah, all right. Let's fill a ruck with sandwiches sometime and make this happen. If anybody else out there is in and wants to feed the homeless out of a rucksack, we can do this. We can match it up with like, there's like the Go Ruck group that, like we're going to work out on the weekend because we didn't join the military and we're 40-year-old CEOs or whatever. Like, give something back, guys. Give something back. Don't just put metal in there. Put some sandwiches in there and pass them out or something, Make it a charitable workout weekend. Should be a thing. Yeah.
We should make it a thing.
All right. I'm in. Sold.
Okay.
2 tickets, please, for the Happy Meal Marathon. All right. What other intentions? You got other intentions? Stuff you want to do?
Nope. Just being of service.
Okay.
Yeah.
The way that I'll try to bridge people's pasts and futures and try to draw them into that present moment, that Eckhart Tolle power of now moment, is with gratefulness, which you've already alluded to repeatedly. But if you were to talk about something that is a gratefulness anchor for you, what are you grateful for, Sherry?
Oh, I already said it. My dad and my brother. Yeah, I wish they listened to these podcasts that I do, because they would hear how often I talk about them.
Give me their email address. I'll send them this one. We'll get them subscribed. It'll be good to
You know what? I'm not even listening to my old lesson. It shouldn't matter if they listen or not. All that matters is, I'm really grateful for them. We have a really special.
Tell me why. What's the big deal with your dad and your brother? Why are you so grateful for them?
Because I think we have a really special relationship, no matter where I am in the world, what time zone it is, which could be all over the place. We carve out a time almost every day for like a 3-way group call, and we go beyond the surface. We don't just like talk about the weather. We talk about politics and philosophy and religion and what's going on in our lives. And we laugh together, and we all watch this news clip every day on our own, and then we discuss that.
Okay.
So
you guys have homework for your group calls. That's awesome.
Yeah. And so I don't know how many people get to have like meaningful conversations with people they love on a daily basis. I'm super grateful for them. And
I know of one so far. That's pretty awesome. Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
are you watching like the Daily Show for that news clip or whatever, at least, or Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, some fun news clip, or is it all doom and gloom like the usual news clips,
It's Democracy Now. Shout out to Amy Goodman. Not that she's listening, but we watch the daily clip from Democracy Now every day.
Nice. Yeah. Right on. Well, that's good stuff. Cool. Yeah, that's absolutely worth being grateful for. And, God bless y'all for your connection there across time and space. That's really hard to accomplish in human history until very, very recently. Way to make the most of it instead of just scrolling through Instagram reels like the rest of us. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. Well, that's definitely something to be grateful for. The fourth question that I'll ask is, with all of your story and where you're coming from and all your intentions and where you're going and all the gratefulness you carry with you, what are you creating in the world?
Well, currently I am creating accessible pathways for individuals to receive psychedelic therapy. Doing that through employer sponsored plans. There's like a really huge disconnect right now. Well, there are many disconnects in the world. One in particular is the way we're treating mental health, where, as you know, up to 60% of people with mental health conditions are treatment resistant. And antidepressants and talk therapy only go so far. They are very helpful for some people. They're not helpful for the people who are treatment resistant. Some of these things, like medications, come with tons of side effects. And, we all know so many people who have been on antidepressants for years, if not decades, and they're playing with dosages, and then they get these side effects. They have to get more pills to address the side effects. And it seems like a broken way to deal with mental health, but it's all we had. And now, all we had until recently. And now we have things like ketamine assisted therapy. And unfortunately, it's not covered by major insurance carriers. So I am creating ways to get people access to this without having to pay out of pocket, and convincing employers that they should pay for it, because it's affecting them too. Not that everything should be about the bottom line, but untreated mental health costs U.S. employers $3.7 trillion a year. So it's not a small amount. If you weigh in like the costs of treating mental health plus the productivity losses plus the retention issues, almost $4 trillion. And I'm trying to disrupt the way we treat mental health in the workplace. Yeah.
How's that going so far? Like, I signed up with you guys a month ago, and we're figuring things out here in Kentucky or whatever, but I know you're trying to do this across the country. I'd like to hear, like, what are the inroads that you're succeeding with? What are the blockages? Like, how's it working so far?
When you do something that hasn't been done before, it's hard to measure, like, how's it going? I think it's going well. Would I like it to be going better? I'll always say yes until we have millions and millions and millions of people that we're helping. But a year ago, we had 450 lives, like covered lives. So people that had access to ketamine assisted therapy through their employer. And now we have just over 150,000. So
Wow.
I guess that's good.
It's orders of magnitude larger. We'll take it, right?
We'll take it. Yeah. And we had one provider in our network, a year ago. And like you said, you just signed up recently and are in that process. We now have close to 200, I think, providers that we're working with. By the way, the person that deals with our provider network is on his honeymoon. So sorry if you don't get a response soon. He's back.
That's just my luck. That's my fault entirely, and I'll take responsibility. I signed up, and that guaranteed things would get jammed up for sure.
There you go. He's back this week. And we also, in terms of progress, have been talking a lot more to unions and people in the construction and oil and gas industry. And that's a huge untapped market. I didn't know until recently the construction industry has the highest rate of suicide, 4.5 times the national average, and double the national average in addiction. And this is like a group of people that are often like have a lot more taboos and stigma just against therapy, forget psychedelics, than we do. And so there's a lot of education to be done and destigmatizing, not just psychedelics, but again, like therapy and mental health. But it's so needed because the suicide rates are so high and the mental health in those industries is so high. So overall, it's going well, and I'm excited about exploring more of those markets.
Yeah. For what it's worth, dudes in my age set and background group got lied to when we were kids. Therapy's not bad for you, and you're not weak if you go there. It's totally worth it. And it's really not that bad. You actually get better. You get some help and you get better and you enjoy your life. Like, go for it. All the construction workers and the roughnecks and all my friends that I got to try to talk into. There are guys, who I could call up in the middle of the night if I needed to do some shenanigans that would be down for all of that sort of stuff, who will not come see me for some help in the clinic, that I
Yeah.
love with all my heart. And it's just a sad thing how much stigma there is around mental health in that particular segment of the population. Let's do something about it, Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're doing that work in the world. It's
Thank
beautiful.
you. Thank you.
Creating beautiful things. Well, that brings us around to everybody's favorite, the fifth and final question, the identity question. Who are you really, Sherry Race?
That's sorry. I feel like I just poured out my heart and soul to you for the past 40 minutes. Don't you already know?
That's called deflecting, people. That's professional deflecting right there.
Oh my gosh. In all seriousness, from what I know so far, I think I have shared without deflecting. I think I am driven by a desire to serve and to alleviate suffering in any form, whether it's poverty or mental health. Like, that's my ethos. I am also, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm also someone who, this one we didn't talk about as much. I lives life with a lot of intention. I know you asked what my intentions are, but I think just naming the fact that I try to do everything with intention, like even, the act of like brushing my teeth in the morning, or, everything I do, I'm like intentionally like mindful of, is this what I want to be doing in this moment? My professional and personal identities are very closely linked through, I don't know, a commitment to social justice and mental health and holistic well-being. I am a global nomad and live a very minimalist life. So I can dedicate my resources and energy to my mission instead of like, there's a repair to do in the house. I don't like dealing with that.
That's fair. Yeah. Me neither, but here I am. Well, let me ask a different question, or come at it from a different angle. Like, we've kind of spoken obliquely about psychedelic assisted therapy and how important that is to you professionally, but how much are you willing to talk about your own experience in that regard? Like, what has it meant to you, and what's that been like to engage, not just in the space, but maybe with the medicine?
Yeah. So first I will say I am comfortable talking about it, and I don't, this will share how I feel about it. I don't think from my experiences, my experiences with psychedelics answers the question of who I am really.
Okay.
For a lot of people, it does.
Yeah.
For sure.
Interesting.
And and I don't think I've ever named that, but because you asked the question in that kind of way, my experiences have been profound and helpful and transformative, but separate to like who I am really. That's been something I've, been trying to figure out for a while. And I just hold those two as separate. But for me, psychedelics have played a huge role in my life, mostly because of how much they have, less so because of my personal experiences with them. Not that I haven't had personal experiences, but more so because of how much they inspire my mission. Like, going back to my life mission of serving others and helping others and reducing suffering, and just like core values of compassion, I see psychedelics so much as a tool to use on that path. And I just see the potential of how it can help so many people with their suffering. I've been really lucky in my life. Again, we talked about kidnappings and like being robbed and all these things. But despite so many things that have happened to me, going back to like my core foundation, I've had a lot of resilience. And so they haven't been for me something that have helped me come out of trauma or helped me come out of a deep depression. But I've seen how they've been helpful for others, and I'm more inspired by that. For me, it's been more of optimization or a pathway to like, reflect and think about life's more existential questions, which I try to do anyways. So I don't know. Does that answer anything?
Well, that level of reflection sounds like it's been, and you mentioned intentionality seems to have been kind of wired into you from early on alongside of service. So maybe, the identity issues feel like something that have been fairly well solidified in your core, that psychedelics those weren't the questions you were carrying into those experiences so much as other questions. Does that sound like a fair summary?
That sounds good. No wonder you're called Doc.
Yeah, it's it's just a nickname. It's not who I really am. Well, you got any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience? It's been a pleasure having this conversation. I really enjoyed all of your stories, and I think I'm a big fan of everything that you're doing in the world out there through Enthea. But you got anything you want to share with the audience before we wrap up?
Thanks for having me. And if anyone listening wants to connect further or has questions, I'm always happy to connect. You can reach out to me at sherry@enthea.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, but email is probably better. And yeah, thanks so much. Just really grateful for you for asking these types of questions and taking us on this journey. Thank you, Doc.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been my honor and my pleasure. And I'll see all of you out there at the first annual Sherry race, whenever that winds up happening. Doc out.